Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. I work with people to help them step into effective leadership and realize their professional and personal goals. If you have known failure and success, if you have had good bosses and bad bosses, if you are a high achiever and want new ideas, and if you want the practical and tactical side of things, then you are in the right place. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. And today we are joined by guest Dorothy Mashburn. Dorothy, how are you?
Hi, Emily. Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I have had an action-packed week, but in the good way, so I'll take it. But very glad to be speaking with you. So you help business professionals go into salary negotiations and make sure that they're getting a fair compensation and they're getting paid what they deserve, essentially.
Yes.
So we are here to talk about what you do in the lens of chief of staff. So chief of staff is a little bit of a different role. It's a little bit unique, not as tied to empirical metrics as some other types of roles. But before I delve into that, can you just tee us up for kind of who you are, your background, and how you came to this point?
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. So I'm a salary and interview negotiation coach. That is my passion, and my goal is to get as many executives as possible to negotiate confidently their value. And how I got here was, as a immigrant to the United States about 20 years ago, I didn't have this like a network or a social structure or mentors or sponsors who could help me navigate corporate life. And over the years, it was a pretty lonely, I would say, and frustrating sometimes experience because, you think you're doing right. You think, working hard is going to get you to your promotions or getting more in salary, but that wasn't the case. And so I am the person that I needed as I was coming up through the ranks. I still work for corporate America. I'm an executive in global supply chain for a large medical technology company. I'm very delighted with my organization. So I'm in the right tribe and right community. But at the same time, there are many people out there who still need help understanding where their salary and compensation needs to be at and how to secure that value for themselves. And that's what I do.
All right, great. So you and I have talked about this, but the chief of staff is a relatively new role. So it's not as if there's decades and decades of salary information out there to kind of peg, okay, here's the salary bands for this type of established role. So maybe the first way to approach it is, where does someone start? If they're an aspiring chief of staff or even an existing chief of staff who's looking to become chief of staff again someplace else, or become a more senior chief of staff at their existing place of employment, what's the first thing they should do in terms of research?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it is a relatively new concept, but at the same time, it's been now around for a few years. So there's quite a bit of data, if you will. But the best place for people to start is networking with other chiefs of staff, right? So that would be one great way to just start getting data points through your networks. So usually when you are triangulating salary information, I suggest you take 3 data points. One is your network, and the best network would be alumni association. So the data tells us that alumni are, like 10 times more likely to pick up the call or respond to a LinkedIn message or an email message. So that would be a great starting point. So your networks is one. The second one is a generic sort of a website like a salary.com or Indeed. And then third would be a more specific website like a Team Blind, H1B.info, or Levels FYI. These are some of the more specific types that focus more into industry. Like for example, Levels FYI will focus more on like the technology side of things. But if you don't have, a lot of data, I would rely heavily on the networking piece. You could start looking, in LinkedIn in the search bars, type in chief of staff. And don't be afraid to just say, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time and pick your brain a little bit? Most people are amenable to 30 minutes. If you sort of say like, hey, I'm trying to break into this field, or I'm already in this field and I want to know a little bit more from other experts, and get started that way.
Okay. And then in terms of trying to demonstrate or convey your value, and what I was mentioning earlier is, if you're a sales leader, then you can go back to your sales track record and said, I grew revenue by this much, or here's how many deals me and my team closed last quarter. But for chief of staff, it's not as straightforward. So what are your recommendations for how do you capture the value that you did create and that you do provide a team and organization when it's a little bit more amorphous or nebulous?
Yeah, I think I would recommend taking out that concept of nebulous, because really, as chief of staff, you are driving results for the organization. So if you're supporting, say, I don't know, the chief financial officer, right, or the chief commercial officer, or the CEO, even, uh, that person is claiming certain victories, some metrics. The company is claiming certain victories and metrics, and you are the person who has facilitated that. So absolutely claim, and what? How are they going to refute if you say, like, I facilitated or spearheaded the campaign that led the double digit growth for the organization, right? So absolutely don't be shy about claiming those kind of the metrics that the company publishes as the metrics that you help drive.
Okay, so if you're part of the sales organization or you're supporting a CEO, you're saying don't be afraid of claiming that as your own. Now, maybe the verb you use is not like I did this all by
Yes,
myself, but I facilitated, I spearheaded, I assisted, I was involved or participated, all of those types of
absolutely.
words.
Yeah. Yeah. Championed,
Mm.
spearheaded, paved the way. So definitely take credit for that, because it is, I mean, it's not a lie. It's absolutely, you did the work to get the company to that goal.
Okay. And and I think that's helpful because it gives people some concrete things to stand on, because I've spoken with a lot of chiefs of staff who are going into conversations like this, and they do fall back to that nebulous kind of I'm on quicksand. I know that I add value, but it's hard to quantify it. So I think tying your actions to these outcomes, these concrete outcomes that the team or your leader has had is fair. It's true, and it's a fair way to approach that conversation. In terms of going into that conversation mentally, that can be very scary for people or very intimidating. Like, okay, where I'm having my, salary review and this is the compensation package I'm negotiating for myself for this new role or for this next year. So what are some things that you work on with people in terms of just getting them ready to go into those types of conversations?
Yeah, that's a good question. It comes up all the time for sure, Emily. There's a lot of fear about negotiation, because you think of negotiation as this high octane Hollywood style, like this kind of combative win lose situation. What I will coach people is think about it as a conversation that you're going to have with your manager or a future manager. And the better way to prepare yourself is to start sprinkling in that you are going to be talking to them about pay raise beforehand. So, if possible, 3 months ahead of time. Like, say, for example, a fiscal year rolls around and the budgeting is done in September. So, at September, when the budgets are being set, or August, September, let your manager know that come January or February, you're going to be asking for a pay raise, or you're going to be asking for a promotion to that chief of staff, and you're going to be talking about that. So don't let it be a surprise either to you or your stakeholder. That's number one. Number two, absolutely don't fear a negative. So if they say no, so what I recommend in negotiations is no is a great start, because now you can start asking curiosity based questions. Why is it a no? When can it be a yes? What do I need to do to turn this no to a yes? So if you go in it with the mindset that it might be a no, so what? Then open the door for further dialogue. It's not a closed door. So think about resetting or reframing negative in those terms, and it's going to fill you with confidence, and it works every time. So try that.
I love that. So it's not an ending, it's a beginning of a
Absolutely.
new kind of conversation.
Absolutely. Well put.
Okay.
Well
Okay.
put.
And to your first point, so I like the fact, like, don't blindside your boss when you go into a conversation. They have no idea this is even on the table. Now, hopefully, they'll have some sense, but don't blindside your boss is always a good guideline. How do you sprinkle in those that information without being like, by the way, in 3 months, I'm going to ask you about a pay raise?
Yeah, yeah. You could, one of the things that sometimes people miss is look at the landscape. If the company is doing well, if the financials are great, if the outlook for the future is fantastic, that is the time to talk about your personal growth and development. Now, if the company is not doing well, I would say just wait, wait it out, or look for another role, right? Or another company. But if it is great, then you start in those conversations. It's like, wow, I'm so excited about this company's growth and the potential for my own personal growth and development, right? Because this is what excites me. So start sprinkling in different ways of saying that, hey, I'm interested in growing with the company. I think that the company is growing to, double its size in the next 10 years. I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm excited about what it means for me and my family, and then the next conversation might be, I am excited about talking to you in January or February about the promotion. Like, how can we help me get us there? How can we work together to get me to the next level or the next pay band? So there is no harm. It'll feel awkward in the beginning, but there is no harm in being direct with your manager. Just do it in a way that is aligned with how the company is performing.
Yeah. And I certainly think I like your point. If you've just done like a riff and there's been rounds of layoffs, pick your timing, right? So it might not be
Yeah,
the exact right time. But on the other hand, it is, standing in your worth and saying, if I truly feel like I deserve more, then to at least be transparent with your boss so they are aware of that, even if you're not making a specific ask at the time. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
and I think sometimes it's having that holistic conversation, like you were mentioning. It's what do you see for our team in the next 12 to 18 months? And be
Hmm.
curious about that piece. And then once you have a conversation about that larger landscape, you can then have a conversation about how you can help get the
Yeah.
team there and
Yep.
what that role looks like and what those activities look like. So I think that's an easy way to get into that type of conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the early days of my career, I just kept waiting, so I would have my one on one with my manager,
Yep.
give an update, and oops, I'm out of here, instead of talking about, what is your vision for the team? Where is this company? What do you think? What excites you about this company's growth? So as they start using the words, dropping words, they'll also drop hints as to where the growth is, what's on their mind, and then you mirror those words back to them and say, hey, you said that the company is growing double digits. I'm so excited about growing with this, and then start talking about how personally you are aspiring to get to the next level and the next.
Yes. Find out what's important to them, and then certainly in their own words, but tie what you're asking for to what's important to them and tie
Ex-
it to the team success. So
yes.
all those things. So let's say that someone has done what you said. So they're like, all right, I know I have a conversation coming up in about 3 months. I'm going to sprinkle in these mentions to make sure my boss is aware of this conversation coming up. I've done my research for the salary bands. And so you're in that conversation and you broach the subject. What are some things that people can think about in terms of the actual kind of talk tracks or the actual details of that conversation?
Yeah, yeah. So let's assume it's a pay raise, right? Let's assume it's a pay raise discussion. You can absolutely bring a one pager with you. And the one pager should contain all the things like we talked about, the metrics that the company has touted, say on LinkedIn or any of the social media channels, and claim that, we delivered, 30% increase in customer growth, or 10% increase in revenue, or 50% reduction in cost, whatever those metrics are. Numbers are important. 80% of that sheet should be numbers. Whether or not you directly delivered or you facilitated, it doesn't matter. Put those numbers in there. And then talk about all of the things you have done last year. And then also have a view of where the company is headed, right? In that one pager. So let's say the company is saying we're going to grow 20% in the next 5 years. So like, 20% in the next 5 years is our growth. Say on one column, you can write that and say, these are my plans. Like I intend to grow and develop my team that I lead in securing the skills in communication and presentation strategy. This is kind of my vision on how I can align my team to that growth and say, based on this, I'm excited about this pay raise discussion because I think that the value I'm going to bring is going to definitely justify the raise that we are discussing today at this table.
Okay. And then just to run through some different scenarios. So these conversations can go, dozens of different ways. If it's I understand what you're saying, but the amount you're asking for, I don't think we need to give you that much. I think what's fair is, maybe 50% of what you're asking for. Are there some options that you run people through there?
Yeah. Yeah. So I always say aim big, right?
Mm.
So let's take an example outside of this. Like, say you wanted, usually people think, oh, I want to get 20% higher, right? And they say, okay, I'm making 100,000, 120 is good. And then they'll think, that may be too much. They may like this may be too awkward. Let me ratchet it down to 110. And then, of course, the counter it happens. And then you're like, oh, 105. Okay, 5,000 more. Great. Done for the next year. Instead, what I say, go high, like 180, right? And then they counter back and then counter back and counter back, but you'll still end up higher than what you would have ended. So you might end up at 130. So 130 is significantly, obviously, better than 105. So go big. That was one. And then when they counter, say you went with 180 and they countered at like 50 down, right? So now you're at 130. Then you can say, okay, well, the market value though is at 180. How else can we get me there? So don't immediately take the 130 and say, okay, done, let's go. Keep pushing because you have to show conviction in your 180 number. You say that is the market value. That is what is being told that the market will bear. I understand financial constraints and absolutely I'm a reasonable employee and I want to work with you. Can we look at personal development? I've always wanted to do my MBA. Like, can the company support that? I've always wanted to do my PMP certification. Will the company support that? So, always have like a backup 2 or 3 different asks that you can then put forth as alternatives to that 180 that you had originally asked for.
Yes. And can some of those things be, if you care about time off, I want to take every other, I don't know, Friday off or whatever, some of those schedule flexibility pieces or some other things that aren't even necessarily monetary or financial, but are important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you, it's a funny one, but one of my clients, she's a marketing executive. We negotiated first class tickets for her because she was traveling a lot for work and the company policy was business class to, 8 hours or more and then regular economy within the country. But one of the things that, it was hard on her jet lag and all of that. So one of the things we negotiated was first class tickets, regardless of where she's traveling to. So, be creative is the point. Be creative. Look at your own needs and the needs of your family or loved ones and say, what are some of the things that I can substitute for straight dollar for dollar pay?
Yeah. What's funny is we had a sales leader who was very tall. So he was like 6'6". So first class, he liked that for that reason, but also he liked first class. And we said, all right, well, we're gonna bake that into your incentive plan. So if your team hits this number, then you can flip over into first class seats. And that was a way to get him motivated. But yeah, first class seats, that's a great one.
Yeah, yeah. Be creative. It's like just the sky's the limit, really. So go crazy.
And I know that in your example, the 180 was based on market research, and you talked about how to come to that number. But I can imagine someone listening be like, "Oh, I could never go out there with conviction at like that high a number." So how do you get people, maybe it's through internal blocking of like how
Yeah.
you actually like 180 is my number. And then you don't shrink backwards. Like if they say 180, like, are you, whoa, how do you get there? You're like, oh, no, that might have been too high. Let me ratchet it down automatically. How do you stand firm in that 180?
Yeah, that's a good question. Data is definitely your friend. So, have data with you, right? Have the data like in your one pager, right? This is what is being um, um, quoted in different sites. Again, the triangulation is very important,
Mhm.
and then just be prepared. So, if your data shows, the coasts like East Coast, West Coast, that can be easily refuted by your manager. So make sure that your data, your research is right. That's number one. And two, affirmations help, but not everybody is a affirmation friend. But I will tell you, like a while ago, I had learned to write down, I am confident, charismatic with everyone I know. And I wrote it down every day, and it like literally helped like get me over like the shyness or feeling like I don't have anything to talk about. So if that is your jam, absolutely write down like I'm worth 180. I'm worth 180. Do it like for a week every morning, and you will see you'll start feeling the difference. It sounds silly, but somehow our brain, with the all the studies with neuroplasticity, it does actually make a difference. So try that as an option, and then the last thing I would say is have your phone and just speak to yourself as a practice. Like how you do a TikTok video
Yes.
or an Instagram reel. You don't have to post it; just do it on the on the video. And these are just small tactics that will help you feel more confident on before the day off.
And one of the things you talked about, it's not a combative situation. It's almost the opposite. Your boss is your ally. And often I found that it's about you helping them make the case to leadership or to the business of, hey, I have Emily over here. She's going above and beyond. I really need to get her a raise, and then arm them with the data points and with the talk tracks and all the information they'll need to make the case to their boss.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic point to bring back. Is you are allying with your boss to get you both because your boss doesn't want to lose you, presumably. So you are helping them. You are helping them help you, sort of, and you both can win. So if you're going in with this kind of win-win mindset, you'll feel less nervous.
Yeah. And I think too, I love the point about the time off and first class seats because often if you rank what's important to me, like what's my one, two, three, four, five most important things, and maybe your top three are non negotiable, and you assume that's the exact same list for your boss or your company, I would question that assumption. They might have a totally separate list and they might go, oh, we can easily give you first class seats. If that's like, that's easy. Like, why didn't you say that before? And for them, they might be able to give on something where you think that's really important. So I think coming at that with the ally mentality and let's just have a conversation and kind of put our cards on the table here and figure out how to make this a win-win for both of us.
Absolutely. Great, great, great point. In negotiations, we call them mesos, like multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. But it's literally what it means. It's like prepare three buckets. To you, it may mean the same, right? 150 in salary, first class tickets, and 5 weeks vacation, or 130 in salary, first class tickets plus 8 weeks in vacation. Maybe for you, those are the same, but to the company, it's going to be different. So if you prepare three buckets in advance,
Mm.
then when you are in the negotiation, you give them those options. It's like a buffet of options, like you pick. But again, it's like the conversation to from the beginning to the day off as to what is important, what is the constraint for the manager or the company. Knowing all of that, being more curious will help you develop those buckets and strategize to win-win for both the employee and the employer.
I think the buffet option is important because it moves the question from, am I going to give them a raise to which option am I going to select?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. And then if if the conversation goes towards the no category, right? So you said, hey, no is the start of a new conversation. I've heard, don't take it personally. I've heard this isn't personal, all those things. And I can see both sides of that, to be honest. So I'm just curious, where do you come down on? Is this a personal conversation or is this like a business conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can actually ever separate personal from business. Like,
Yeah.
I know it's absolutely easier said than done. I think you take it as a professional, right? And say, if it's an absolute no and you don't feel like there's any budge, then just say okay and leave and then have a cry in the bathroom or whatever, right? Because it's sometimes you cannot separate personal from business, but you have to absolutely act professional in the moment and prepare yourself for that. And then you have to weigh your options. Is this the manager I want to report to for another 5, 10 years or whatever? Or if there's another person within the organization or a different organization. So that's absolutely something you should think about and, be almost ready beforehand to talk yourself into how am I going to react if this is an absolute no? Because you will know ahead of time what or at least have a pretty good estimate of how the conversation is going to go. So be ready for that. Um,
There's
yeah.
lots of preparation. So there's like collecting the data, make sure it's accurate, prepare yourself, maybe with affirmations or something else, and then maybe run through some likely contingencies that might happen and prepare yourself for those. So I think
Yeah.
being prepared and trusting yourself that you did do the prep work, I think is important too, besides being in there and being like, I don't know what's gonna happen. This could go any one
Yeah.
of directions and it's up to them. Um and for the for me as a boss, there were plenty of times when I would have loved to give someone a raise, but we didn't have the budget. I would have loved to give them their full raise and their full ask. And I like my hands were tied and I felt bad. And I did my best to convey the situation to them. And in certain cases, I said, look, I would give you all of that and more if I could. Here's the situation we're in. Here's where I think we're going to be in 6 months from now. I will promise that we'll at least have a conversation at that point to check in. Is there something like that that, if you're in those conversations, maybe, what's our next follow-up from this? If it's a no, like what's the next step from here?
Yeah, you can, if your boss already does that, that's great, right? But not all bosses would be like you, Emily. Like sometimes they are just not able to maybe even articulate, right? Maybe that's their intention, but they aren't able to articulate. So it's almost incumbent on you to um,
Ask. Yeah.
pull out that kind of give from the manager, right? So I have a person now who's hit like the top in the pay bands, right? That I'm able to provide it. I'm like I can only give them like the regular 3.5% raise,
Mm.
and I would like to give them more. So what we are doing now together is working on a promotion in a different vertical. So we are giving her exposure and projects and special assignments, so a promotion is possible, and we can give the raise through that angle. So there are many different ways within an organization. If your manager is one that you're lucky enough who can maneuver through different conversations, great. If not, then take the lead on that and say, "Hey, I want to do this and this. I want to get this raise. Let's work together to help me get there." And then go from there.
But I think it's fair to ask, what would it take to get that raise? Back to one of your first questions.
Mhm.
So outlining those things. Okay. And sometimes it's fair. It's like, look, we need someone who's able to do this, 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 and this. And maybe you can do the first couple, but you haven't demonstrated you're able to do these last few. And so it's a fair ask to say, here are the types of projects that we would need to see you complete and be successful on. And just being clear and coming to an agreement with your boss on those. So if it's a no, is that the next part of the conversation?
Yeah. Yeah. And then think about time binding that conversation, right? So say they say, we have not seen you delegate. Like you're a great workhorse and you work really hard, but you hoard projects, and you don't delegate. So that is something I want to see. Okay. So can we do a time check? 3 months from now, I'm going to come back and check in with you to see how I'm doing, or even 1 month, like pick your time. Every month and a half, I'm going to check and see if I'm meeting expectations or exceeding expectations. So don't let your manager off the hook. So if they propose something, definitely hold them to a timeline to say, hey, like I'm going to meet with you, I'm going to take the action, and I also want feedback. How am I doing? How am I progressing? And then, maybe 6 months, mid-year review, or even like the next performance review. Hopefully you have taken the feedback and implemented it, and then it's like time for my promotion or time for my pay raise.
And I think it's important to say, you want me to delegate more. How would you know if I'm doing that? Or what would tell you I'm
Yeah.
successful at delegating? Just so I have my definition of delegating and you might have yours. But I love what you said about in 3 months, I want some feedback. Because to
Mhm.
me, that's, maybe some people would take that as push, like, geez, like, okay, in 3 months, we'll talk about this again. But if you're saying, I want some feedback,
Feedback.
to me, that's, I'm taking this seriously. Like, I'm going to actually actively work on and I would like some feedback at a 3 month mark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And like it is important to know there are managers who welcome that. If you're not working for a manager like that, question that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, question that. Because there is some accountability that you also want from your manager, right? And I expect my team that reports to me to hold me accountable. And if they can't, then they need to question if I'm the right manager for them.
Yeah. And I guess that's a through line here is if you're going through this whole process and you just feel like your manager doesn't care, they're not for you, this is like the last thing they want to be talking about, that feels one way. And if you have a manager who is very engaged, is very forthright with their feedback and transparent, and they're wanting to help you get better. And even if they can't do something right at the time, you can tell that they are invested in you. That feels different. So it might be in this process, would it be collecting data points on
Mhm.
that relationship, on that dynamic?
Yes, very good point. Absolutely. That is one more information, like you said, data point to have in your
Yeah.
arsenal.
Yeah. Is there anything else big that we missed or you think would be important to cover if you're a chief of staff going into a salary compensation discussion with your boss?
Yeah, I think the chief of staff, because it's so varied in various organizations, you may tend to think, oh, my role is not that critical to the organization, or it's still new and people are still. So don't let that phase you. I guess like be confident in your value. You bring a lot to the table. Uh, you know, if especially the amount of multitasking you do, the amount of you're almost like an entrepreneur. You're doing so much. So you need to be paid your value because without you, the whole place will fall apart. So be confident in that. And if you need like a, pep talk, talk to Emily or talk to a coach or talk to me or,
Talk to Dorothy.
talk to Dorothy. Um, just be assured that this role is just going to continue to grow in importance and criticality. And you are setting the foundation for future generations. So it's almost, I'm going to put this on a little plug here too. Like you owe it to them to fight for your worth. So fight for your worth and be confident in your value.
And Dorothy, if someone does want to talk to you or learn more about what you do, I think you have a free script, so a salary script
Yes.
online.
Yes.
Where do they find that?
So it's DorothyMashburn.com, and very top there's a free pay raise script. So feel free to download that. I'm also on LinkedIn, and then I have a podcast, Salary Negotiations Made Simple. Please follow, subscribe, and provide ratings. That always helps reach more audiences. So that would be a very nice treat. Thank you very much.
Very good. We will have all that information in the show notes. And Dorothy, thank you for being on. I think you've given us some practical tips that chiefs of staff can go and put into action. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the questions, Emily.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.